What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So in today's Motorfest video, I do want to go over a pretty interesting topic. I have also been seeing a lot of people talking about this recently because I do feel like it is honestly pretty important. Now the question here I am asking though, and I also want to know what you guys think immediately in the comments below. Do you think the Crew 2 content needs to stop for Motorfest to be better? I also want to go over like different updates that have come out in that game that probably should have been in Motorfest. So first things first, yes, we are going to be almost 5 months into this game's life cycle, and we are currently coming up to Season 3 pretty quick, which currently, by the way, is going to last around 4 months instead of 3 months. So I am honestly hoping in some way we're probably going to get more cars or like more updates, maybe extra playlists and all kinds of things being added in that Season 3, because we kind of need it insanely bad for this game to thrive, and I would say a lot of players are most likely hoping for it. Now, my big concern here about the Crew 2 getting updates and, different things still to this day is probably going to hurt the Crew Motorfest in many ways. I do understand the Crew 2 is probably going to be like the bread and butter or even a $1.30 McChicken, but at least they used to be that price because they're not now. But I would say a lot of players are probably not going to be the happiest with the way the content is being produced for Motorfest compared to like the Crew 2. And I honestly can agree in some ways with this. So the first things first is we do obviously know on November 14th or around that time we got the Crew 2 Mad update, which was going to bring a bunch of new skills and also new vehicles into the game. We not only got like the Audi TT back then, we also got like the Renault. We also actually got two of those and the Gordon Murray or Gordon Murray vehicles, which is going to be like the new McLaren F1. I was honestly kind of surprised those cars were going to be added into the Crew 2. And the reason I do say this though is a lot of players are most likely moving on to Motorfest now after all of the updates, and they really do want to get into a new game that's probably going to be like a new experience. Don't get me wrong, the Crew 2 is still going to be great, but that game is going to be 5 years old, and many players are most likely looking for like a newer, even a better experience, better graphics, better handling, and just newer things to do. So it is kind of surprising to me that they most likely added all of those cars into that game first, even though the Crew Motorfest is supposed to be like the new or even hyped game that is out, even though they are putting new cars into that game first. Now, one thing I did find kind of insane is those cars are going to come out in Season 3, and we are most likely going to see this once again in a different update in that game, giving us cars coming out into Motorfest later on. But what's kind of insane, guys, is on February 14th, the Crew 2 got 3 new Porsches. In Motorfest, the game only got 2 vehicles, which, by the way, one of them was going to be in the beginning of the Hoonigan update, but we did not get that car until like the 3rd month of that said season. So I can definitely see why some players are honestly getting slightly frustrated. Now, if I have to admit one thing, could they put all of those vehicles into Motorfest instantly? Well, that would probably be one of the better options to do. That way players can't run them. Now, don't get me wrong, though. I would guess and say Motorfest is probably going to have a smaller player base in some ways than the Crew 2 right now. Hopefully, that is going to change in the future with more updates coming for this game. But the one thing I am asking, though, guys, once again, is that game getting updates going to hurt Motorfest in the future? Now, we do know this game is supposed to be like the new hyped game in the series, even though they are putting updates and different cars into the older game, which I do know a lot of players are most likely moving on to Motorfest. We also do know most content creators are not doing videos on the Crew 2 anymore, because, Motorfest is going to be like the newer game that many players are on. A lot of people are most likely not going to be on the Crew 2 like they were before. I'm not even going to lie, guys, I only really get on that game now to do some of the summits, when at least like that crazy looking Porsche Cayenne did come out, but besides that, I'm really not playing that game like I used to. Now, I do admit, though, going back on there and doing some of the mad skills was honestly pretty dang fun, though. Like, driving up on these weird courses and, like, driving cars in places they don't belong in was honestly a pretty cool concept, but once again, I have to ask the question, why did they not add the mad skills update as something smaller into Motorfest to add on more things you can do? I feel like there's a lot of places around the map they could most likely add, like crazy courses for like the Rally Raid or even Rally Cross. Most of the insane things in the Mad Skills update was obviously like, created on the map itself and it wasn't part of it. Something almost like the Playground Island that was in the Hoonigan update. Now, moving aside from like the map DLC or even map add-ons, the biggest thing players obviously want are going to be new vehicles. On that map update on the Crew 2 back in November, that was going to bring a total of 9 new vehicles. That is obviously going to be a lot of cars players most likely do want. Like, I can probably name a lot of people, or most likely everybody for that matter, that definitely do want to see the new Gordon Murray car in this game. Like, that thing looks incredible. And I would say in Motorfest with this engine, it probably would sound amazing as well. And a lot of players would most likely want to drive that thing around in the new updated game. But having that back in the Crew 2, including myself, a lot of players most likely went back. They did indeed jump back into that car, and they probably went, yeah, cool, bro. Anyway, I'm going to get back on Motorfest now because I only drive this car for a little bit. And I do know some players can argue that, yeah, the map is bigger. A lot of players like the entire US map. But as I did mention before, I don't feel like a lot of players most likely want to play on that map, though. Like, for example, if Motorfest was another updated version of the Crew 2 or the Crew 1, how many people would honestly like that aspect of it? Like, all of the same events being added, the map might be a bit different looking again, and then they might end up adding a few things onto it. Like, yes, that would probably be kind of cool, but let's be honest though, driving on the exact same map for 12 to 13 years is probably not going to be the funnest thing you can do in basically any game for that matter. Now, I do admit, guys, as before, I do feel like a lot of cool updates are going to come into Motorfest, but one of my big concerns with this, though, is are they going to have Motorfest on, like, a back burner while updating the Crew 2 for, like, another 4 months? We do know apparently that game is going to be updated until something like June. That is going to bring us into Season 3, almost on the last part of it, going into Season 4 of Motorfest. So, like, are we going to get, like, these half-baked updates, or, like, you know, all of the updates going into the Crew 2 bringing new vehicles, and then all the new vehicles in that game are not going to come into Motorfest until, like, Season 4? I would almost say that's probably going to be almost like a nail in the coffin to this game. A lot of players are most likely not going to stick around till Season 4 until we get, like, proper updates. And on top of those newer updates coming into Motorfest, the Crew 2 is still indeed going to be updated, bringing a bunch of new cars into that game that players most likely want in Motorfest. Like, for example, a good way to look at this is going to be the Audi RSQ8, and also the new Porsches going into that game, plus we obviously have the Renaults. I would almost guess that many players want those in Motorfest like right now, or even yesterday, but no, you're going to have to wait till Season 3 for all of that collection import to come over, which, by the way, hopefully the collection import does work as intended. I haven't heard of anyone else having issues with the other one from Season 2, but I guess only things are going to tell in time there. And I can't be the only one thinking about this either. Like, I do know the Crew 2 is still going to have a very strong player base. A lot of people are still most likely going to be on that game because it has so much content in there. And in some ways, we can't agree Motorfest is obviously lacking. But if they do continue to update that game and most likely put the Crew Motorfest on a back burner, that is easily going to hurt this game's future in basically every way. And what's kind of insane though is if they do stop making content on the Crew 2, let's say that does happen in June, like let's say they don't make any content for it, is Motorfest still going to have a strong player base to keep players in that game now? Or a lot of players most likely going to stay in the Crew 2 after the updates stop in there? That is probably going to be a terrible cycle, or at least a very bad thing that could happen. And I would say going down the road right now, that's most likely going to be a possibility. Now, the one reason why I mention this, though, is let's say we did see a new Call of Duty game come out. Like, let's go with something like Black Ops 5 or something like that. If that game did come out and obviously players were on, like, a previous Call of Duty title, and they did not update the new Call of Duty title as much as they were supposed to, or even if they did want to, they most likely did not put a lot of stuff into it, or even new things did come out in there, but they did update the older Call of Duty more, and probably put different guns and stuff in that game that players wanted. And then on top of that, though, imagine having to wait around 3 months for that gun to actually come out in the next season. Like, I feel like that would pretty much make anybody mad. Like, nah, bro, I want that gun now. Why do I have to wait 3 months? And now flipping that over back to Motorfest, you're then going to have to wait for those vehicles to come out in the next season. I almost feel like, yes, I do understand the Crew 2 does obviously need, like, updates, but the new bread and butter here is most likely going to be Motorfest, and I would say, like, long term, a lot of players are most likely going to want to play this game over the Crew 2 being out as long as it was. Like, that game is easily going to have a lot more content. It's also been out for around 5+ years as well, whereas Motorfest has pretty much been out maybe 4 or so months. So I would almost expect this game to have less content, but I do understand to a certain extent where everybody is coming from. Now, I do have to admit one thing here, though, guys. Like, I do understand this game is going to be early on in its life cycle, but can we all agree now, though, that Motorfest does indeed need the torch to be passed over to this game, and most likely not wait until June or July before it starts getting, like, proper big updates? I do feel like Motorfest most likely will need them sooner than later. Now, don't get me wrong, though, the Crew 2 most likely had all of these updates planned out for it, like, way before. So I do understand where they are coming from with like all of the updates coming out in the Crew 2 that they did obviously plan for, but I also think at the same time Motorfest is in dire need of some of these updates because some of them are honestly pretty dang cool. Like for a second guys, imagine that Mad Skills update coming out in Motorfest instead and adding all kinds of new skills, and like all of those could be in summits. That would honestly be insane instead of those being in the Crew 2 in those summits, which when I was on there, as I did mention earlier, a lot of players are not even doing them. Like, to be honest, why get on there and do something for like a full gold part set? A lot of people are most likely on Motorfest trying to get part sets on here. Why go back into the Crew 2 and do that, knowing that that game is most likely going to stop getting updates? But besides all that, though, guys, I would like to know what you think about this entire thing in the comments below. Do you think Motorfest does obviously need the torch and the Crew 2 does probably need to slow down? And I do want to mention on top of that though, the biggest thing about these videos is I'm not trying to like complain or like rant or anything like that, but the biggest thing here is I really do want Motorfest to actually get better and also succeed in the future of like a racing game itself. On top of that though, guys, I really do want gaming to get better as an overall thing, and I feel like spreading the word and also making these type of videos is not only going to spread the awareness, but most likely get this stuff out there more.